Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1253 of the Locked on Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday in early June, heading into Monday and a new week on the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is covered with all of the stuff that you need in the sports world this year, and that includes more props, more odds, and more lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. And today's show will be myself and Glen Willis, friend of the podcast for Peachtree Hoops, talking about Onyeka Okongwu, continuing our player capsule series. Glen's been kind of joining for all of these so far, wall-to-wall stuff on the roster. We talked about all kinds of guys from Collins to Gallinari to DeAndre Hunter to the supporting pieces, Jalen Johnson, etc. All of that already on the podcast. 2 or 3 more of those coming after this one. But today's show is really all about centered on Okongwu and his development after his first 2 seasons, his future, and much more. But before that, I should plug a few things from last week. We had a 2-part episode with Ben Pfeiffer on the NBA draft. Ricky O'Donnell, SBH, joined me on the show last week as well for the NBA draft. We have all kinds of draft coverage coming in about 2.5 weeks now until the NBA draft. I know not everybody loves the draft like I do, but it's very important. It sort of opens up conversations for other things going on about the Hawks as well. So plenty of coverage here in the offseason. Basically, we don't take a break at all in the offseason for the most part on this show. And we definitely encourage you to subscribe to the podcast on your platform of choice, whether it be Apple Podcasts or YouTube or Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you like to find podcasts, we should be there. And I really appreciate all the cross subscriptions on all kinds of platforms and telling your friends as well. Auto downloads, ratings, reviews, everything you possibly do to support the show. I do very much appreciate that. Please follow the show on Twitter as well at Locked on Hawks. Follow me on Twitter if you'd like to at BT Rowland. And after a quick break to hear the intro of this podcast, we'll be back with myself and Glen on Onyeka Okongwu.
You are Locked on Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I am joined again by my friend Glen Willis. Glen's been faithful enough to join me on a lot of these podcasts recently. Glen, I appreciate all of the time, and we'll be diving into a different player today. But how are you on this fine Sunday as we record this?
I'm good. I'm in San Francisco, flew in this morning, and I'm getting some flack for not finding my way to the game tonight. But I was traveling last week and obviously traveling this week, and it's not going to set me up for success. So even though I'm probably only about 12 miles from where that game is going to take place right now, I'm guessing about that. I'll be watching it on TV like everybody else.
Yeah, like the rest of us. No, I appreciate the flexibility, and I've been on the road too. So diving back into it here, back at my home studio and all those fun things. But our agenda item on today's podcast is to talk about a young guy, and it's Onyeka Okongwu, a pretty interesting player in a lot of ways. He is still only 21 years old. He'll be 22 in December. Obviously has shown a lot of promise, as we'll sort of dive into here, but I was reminded in looking up some stuff about Okongwu, he's only played 98 games over 2 seasons and about 1,593 minutes, which for comparison's sake is less than a lot of guys played this year only, like on the Hawks roster. If you combine Okongwu's 2 seasons in the league, he still would have played fewer minutes than Gallo played this year only. So it kind of tells you like how little Okongwu has actually been able to play, and obviously we know diehard fans would know at least part of, most of that's injury related. Also, to the fact that he has Capella on the team, so there's some sort of a ceiling on how much he's going to play. But sort of broadly speaking, I wonder what your impressions have been of Okongwu, both I guess back to his rookie year as well, but also in his second season where he played 48 games and was largely good when he played.
Yeah, he was really good this year. It was interesting. My first note here is, can he take the wear and tear that he would need to be a starter? I know that you and I hear from a lot of Hawks fans who are like, let's make him the starter, let's make whatever moves that need to make that happen. And I'm like, I'm not sure that we know the answer to that question yet. I don't want to suggest that the answer is no, not at all. But he's a bit on the undersized side, as we know, not by much, but enough that as a young, smallish kind of center, I think that is a big thing that needs to be kind of found out is could he handle like starters minutes? Can he give you 75 to 80 games of 30 minutes a game? Considering like you mentioned, the injury history and stuff. So for me, he's probably the single player on the team I'm most intrigued by. Like right now, I'm most like really interested to see like what becomes of him, especially going here into year 3. And there's a lot to be excited about, a lot of like specific areas of potential I know we'll get into. But in terms of like what could they do with him heading into year 3, I think that's probably my biggest question is can he get to even 1,800 minutes, for example, without kind of running into several injuries again. Hope so, but I don't think you know until you kind of see that.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, it's sort of there's always context to these conversations, and we, like I sort of mentioned before, we know why he hasn't played a lot so far. He's had a couple injuries. He had a late start to his rookie season. Famously, he was hurt when they drafted him. They knew that, but they took him anyway. And he's also obviously had pretty much a backup only role. There were times when Capella's been out, but other than that, he's never going to start over Capella, at least in the recent form. And you sort of talked about one of the questions that we always get is like, why is he playing over Capella? And you and I will talk about Capella on a different episode, but he's quite good still, Capella, obviously, and is certainly a high standing veteran guy making a lot of money and still a really good player. So interesting situation. And the other big one, of course, is there's a school of thought that Okongwu is not a center because he's 6'8". And that's the old school, the Al Horford. I always make the comparison all the time about him and Al Horford because there was always this chatter about whether Al Horford was a natural center or whatever it was going to be. And 15 years later, he's still playing center and doing a good job. So I think it's kind of a silly argument in some respects, but the Hawks do view him as a center. I think maybe long term he could play a little bit of 4 at some point. He is a talented guy. He could definitely do that. But all indications, just as I sort of lay the groundwork here, or that he is a center until otherwise noted. So just plan on that. Part of that is that he's not a shooter yet, which we'll get into as well. But I want to start with the defense, actually, because that's where he has really shined at times. And clearly that's what they saw in him. They talked about that a lot when they drafted him, both before the draft and at the draft night. And then after that and summer league and all that stuff, they always talk about his defensive upside. I think we've definitely seen that. He's super switchable. Great athlete, great feel, does foul a lot, which has kept him off the floor at times as well, going back to the minutes that we discussed before. But what do you think of him defensively? The big thing, of course, is that he's very different from Clint Capella, which makes it very interesting for him to play in that same role because it's not always the same role as Capella. But what do you make of his defense right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to see like the things that he can do, and right now I think it's an overused phrase, but the flashes that he's shown, I mean, brilliant flashes, big clutch plays like deep in the fourth quarter, coming up with blocks, elevating his play on that end at just the right time. Maybe there's something to him kind of. Some players just know how to, raise their game just that much more towards the end of the game, and that we've seen a number of times where when he's closed games, he's kind of, come up with like critical defensive stops that really kind of help them turn, a game that was in the balance into a win. But the mobility is exciting. He kind of makes the size work for him. I think he is stronger than a lot of people realize. On a single possession, I kind of trust him to hold up versus kind of the bigger guys. The question is, can he do that on 50 to 60 possessions a game or whatever that might be, if it's Embiid, that sort of thing. He has quite obviously the ability to kind of get on the perimeter, switch, guard smaller guys, guard the ball, things like that. But I want to be a little careful in kind of throwing that out there too casually, because I think a lot of Hawks fans think that that's already kind of an automatic thing he has. He's pretty far from perfect in his technique when he gets switched onto the ball, and such. Not a surprise. He's a young, big man, and the NBA has the best ball handlers in the world, the best creators in the world, and stuff. But I think that he could kind of get to a really, really high level there. I just think that it's important to note that he has some growing to do kind of in that area. If Hawks fans think we could just throw him out there and switch 1 through 5 every minute he's on the floor, he's not ready for that in my assessment. Although I think he's on a trajectory to get there, maybe even at some point this year, if not this year, maybe next year. So the versatility is like the thing that jumps out at you, and then when you combine that with his tendency to come up with really big stops at the rim on important possessions, that's pretty exciting stuff to me.
We'll have more from Glenn and I in a moment, but first, a word from our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline is the number one source for all of the sports betting needs and information that you need this season. That includes, of course, the NBA Finals that are going right now between the Warriors and the Celtics in the NBA space, but wall-to-wall coverage beyond that at BetOnline. Find all the latest odds, news, and developments in the sports world. That includes the playoffs, of course, Major League Baseball stuff, the latest fights, even next season's NFL, college football, and college basketball futures. The market is always open as you look ahead with some future-facing value, and that's always fun to evaluate this time of year. BetOnline also has all the information that you want, and that includes live betting, esports, poker, casino games, and much more, as well as other sports that you might enjoy. And that includes golf, tennis, auto racing, horse racing, soccer, cricket, and entertainment bets, and anything you can possibly think of in the sporting space. They definitely have it at BetOnline. Head there right now on your computer, mobile device, sign up right now and check out all of the stuff that you possibly could want and all the trends, all of the action. Tell your friends about BetOnline and find all the offers that they have all in one place at BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts. There's kind of a give and take with Okongwu versus Capella, which is an obvious comparison. They're on the same team, same position, all that stuff. And there's that everlasting conversation about when you move on from Clint, which we won't do the whole thing now because that's not this purpose of this episode. But, part of the appeal, like you said, is the versatility, is that he can, at least in theory, be scheme versatile. He's not a 7-footer. He's not going to be a 7-footer. He's not going to suddenly be a monster physically like that, but he is a great athlete. He is pretty long for his size, and the timing and stuff that he does really around the rim protection is really intriguing for someone of his size. Like, he's got a solid enough block rate for someone his size. I think he's been blocking like 2+ shots per 36 minutes in his career. That's totally fine. There's the rebounding question with him, which is always a question, at least a lot of questions for smaller centers. Famously, again, there's that Al Horford comparison where that was probably his number one weakness defensively, was that his rebounding was not very good. And so far in his career, Okongwu's been a pretty bad defensive rebounder for a center. Now, that doesn't mean it will always be that way, but he does have that limitation that he's not a huge guy. But, in drop, they've kind of used him there. And actually, I want to ask you this question. Do you think that he has been able to kind of explore as much of what he can be than maybe he will in the future? Because one of my theories is that they kind of had to build the system around Capella, and they kind of asked him to play Capella system a lot of the time. Not always, but a lot of the time. And that makes sense. Like, when you're playing your starter, who, especially 2 years ago, was like an all defense level guy, you're going to build your system around what he can do. And Okongwu is going to kind of be asked to do a lot of that. Now, it's not always the case, but you think that's been sort of a theory of what they've been doing, and maybe we haven't seen all of what Okongwu can do because of that? Because that kind of strikes to me as like a pretty logical thing. Like, you're not going to build your defense around him necessarily yet because he's not the guy yet.
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's so many different levels to the way we can answer it and kind of talk about it. One is, with Okongwu being such a young guy, it would not have made sense to this point to play a different scheme when he's on the court. He's been learning from Clint how to organize the team on the defensive end of the court. And when his job coming off the bench is to come in and kind of continue and provide continuity to what's been going on with Clint there, Okongwu is going to be better set up for success if they don't take the approach where, okay, Clint, when you get in, we're going to go to switching 1 through 4 or switching 1 through 5 or whatever, when Clint's been playing straight dropper, and all that sort of stuff. With a young center that's kind of learning how to become really vocal and a strong organizer on that end, him replicating mostly what they have Clint doing game to game and across the regular season makes a ton of sense. Now, we're maybe at a fork in the road now, so I don't think there's been kind of any serious missed opportunity there yet. But now that we're heading into year 3, I do think you have to start kind of thinking about, how do we optimize this, young center that we invested a really high draft pick in, and all that sort of. It has that. So, I've been, maybe I probably pay more attention to sort of how the organizing goes and the communication goes than the average person. And he's, I would say, like, he's 80% there right now based on how he played like the final month, 2 months of the season or so. He still is not quite as in charge as you'd like to see, but he's still ahead of the curve for what you think a second year one and done, center, 21 years old. So that's not a ding at all. And especially considering, I mean, it might not sound like a big deal, but you think he hasn't gotten to play in either summer league, which is where he could be given a ton of leadership opportunity, even in just like a week and a half, to kind of go in and organize that team. And there's a lot of growth there that's been unfortunate. I can't imagine he's going to play summer this year, but I mean, we've seen weirder things happen, I guess. He might be one of those where he's there organizing and leading, but not playing. We've seen that from kind of guys coming out of year two. I wouldn't be surprised there. But for me, when I look back, I think the plan has made sense, so far. However, now to kind of set him on kind of a more of an individual trajectory that's going to maximize and optimize him, it's going to have to look different than what they do with Clint when Clint's on the floor, assuming both guys are back and kind of playing again. So I think it's a great question. I think it's time to start seeing some differentiation. It's a scheme variance when Okongwu was on for Clint to get more out of him and to continue setting him up for the best kind of growth and development trajectory that he can have.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't want to spend the whole conversation talking about like those two guys in comparison to each other. It's just very logical that if you're building your roster, and particularly your defensive roster around Okongwu, you would need to do it differently than you would with Clint. And that's the reality. I think, whether you want to use creativity or versatility or whatever, how you want to describe that in a broad sense for your coaching staff and for your roster, it's going to have to be different to make Okongwu the best that he could be. And by proxy, like if they were just to trade Clint, let's say, just as a hypothetical, and just kind of anoint Okongwu as the guy moving into year three, you would kind of have to spend part of your offseason figuring out what your defense was going to look like, because that's part of the deal. It's not only Okongwu, but when he's your anchor at that point, then it needs to be different, because you don't want him dropping all the time like you do with Clint. You don't want him limited to he could do that. We've seen him do it. He does it just fine. But you want to at least use what he can do talent wise to maximize. And also, again, rebounding. I'm not going to do that too much on this conversation, but Clint, they basically have relied on to get every rebound for 2 seasons. And he's not going to be able to do that at a bare minimum. Okongwu is never going to be Clint as a rebounder. That's very clear. So interesting stuff, and we'll get into the offense too. There are different plays on offense as well, but it's just really interesting to me, like what the next step is, because it's not a secret. We talked about it. We don't, and I are not the big transaction guys, but at some point they're going to have to choose what they want to do at center. It may not be now. This might be the time that they do it, but I think the way you put it is a good way to put it. Like at minimum for year 3, if they're both still on the roster, they do need to probably give Okongwu a little bit more to do that's tailored to him, and maybe try to use that transition in that way. I don't know what that looks like necessarily or how you scheme that, but I think it probably is time to kind of just take him out of that out of the comfort zone that he's currently in now, I guess.
Yeah, and maybe to get into just a little bit more nuances, I know that it may seem like, well, the decision is to switch or not to switch. It's not just that. Like, no, it's Okongwu getting up all the way to the level of a screen more regularly than Clint does. You want Clint typically Clint can get up there and make an impact and recover fine, but Okongwu could have an exceptional recovery ability, so that you can get him further away and rely on him to kind of navigate back and get back. So it's not just switch or not switch. And then we talked about the continuity, scheme continuity the first 2 years here, and it's important to note that one thing that has to be different, and you kind of started our conversation there, is that when Clint's on, the other 4 guys could basically just, get out of the fast break, start filling lanes, whatever, because Clint's got the rebound. Even if they're running the exact same scheme, when the Okongwu's on, a couple guys have to come back and help rebound the basketball. At least that's the case right now. So even if you're running the same scheme, some of the individual responsibility and the way that players need to engage in different kind of areas of play does change a little bit right now. Now, Okongwu could improve as a rebounder. There's some things that he can do kind of technique-wise and things like that. Get himself in a little better position, beat his guy to the spot. And so that's just kind of some still youngish kind of center stuff that can come along. So I don't want to cap him as a bad rebounder or
no, and I don't mean to do that either. I feel like it's just I've said this on the show before. Even I don't think it's a guarantee that he's always a bad rebounder. Agreed. I don't think he's going to be Clint Capella rebounding wise. That's I think
rebounder. Yeah,
right. I think he's going to improve as a rebounder most likely. I think that's almost natural. Like he'll get stronger, he'll get more depth at the tricks and all that stuff that you need to be able to do. but like maybe he's just only average, and average would be totally fine for what he actually gives you elsewhere. But I think you have to remember this, and going back to pre-Capella days from 2 years ago when it was Alex Len and whoever else, like you can't just suddenly rely on your center to get every rebound. And that goes to the long-term thing about like who you pair him with. That's a whole different conversation. But you need to, at minimum, have some more gang rebounding principles than you do now, where it's just a lot of get out of the way. Clint will take care of it. He's not going to be that kind of guy.
Yeah. And if listeners want to watch kind of one thing coming, when we get to the new season is, we talked about some of the tricks and stuff like that. The thing that is probably the most useful to watch is right now he gets hooked a lot. He gets his arm, someone gets into his arm and shoulder, kind of clamps, one half of him, one side of him. And he finds himself in that situation way too much. He's got to learn how to keep his arms higher, kind of get into space proactively and things like that. And that just the little nuances like that will help him a ton. And he's such a good processor, mental processor, and has such good technique, discipline, and attention to detail in other areas that I just expect that more of that's going to show up in the rebounding too as he gets more experience.
We'll go to offense in a second, but the last thing I want to make sure that we get to is his fouling. I mentioned it briefly. I don't think it's a huge concern. And to be fair, he did improve his foul rate in year 2, is a little bit lower, but it seemed like almost every game or close to every game, he'd have 2 fouls in pretty short order. And it's kind of always, it didn't bite them a lot because he had Capella. Like he wasn't expected to play 35 minutes and they had to have such a short leash on him. But is it just a young guy thing for him, or is that anything that you're concerned about moving forward? Because I think his foul rate combined in his career is like, 7.5 per 100 possessions. It's pretty high.
Yeah, this is where, it's an issue for sure, but it looks differently than it normally does with young guys. Normally we see young centers fouling at this rate. They're biting on, pump fakes. They're getting in the air too early, too quickly, too eagerly, and not able to kind of contain kind of their position. He doesn't get many fouls that way where he's kind of biting and jumping and things like that. He stays on the floor pretty well. I think a lot of it is just learning how to do the things even with good technique with a little bit less size. I think officials officiate smaller centers differently. Optics are different. I don't want to get off on one of my famous officiating here, but it's just kind of a reality. When you're challenging a shot from more of a neutral kind of possession instead of kind of getting, a really high kind of block point, it looks different to an official, and that's where that's going to come. So, for me, there's not any kind of massive like footwork issues that's getting him into positions where offensive players can take advantage of him all the time. Like I said, he's not, doing a lot of the things that young guys who have foul issues do. It's a little bit different, but so I think that's going to be fine. I think another part of that, going back to the very first one we talked about, was just he hasn't had as many reps as you'd like him to have had by now, and that is a huge factor, and maybe the biggest factor when it comes to the fouling is just you'd love to have for him to have like 40% more minutes than he has right now, or whatever, and I think that would have resulted in what I refer to the feedback loops that kind of come along and help a player kind of grow from that. So I think because the technique is pretty good and that doesn't kind of show up there, I think it's probably mostly related to his limited number of reps so far, and I think that's a reason to be encouraged for more improvement.
Yeah, I think he'll figure it out. I think you're spot on in that guys his size might get officiated a little bit differently. Also, young guys just inherently seem to get officiated differently, whether that's inherent or on purpose or whatever. I think it's not, and that's why I don't really worry about it. I think he has to improve, especially when he's a center full time as sort of the starter or maybe more prominent role. He's going to have to avoid fouling to stay on the floor a lot more. But I think it's going to be he has to do it, and also I'm not worried about him doing it. I think he'll be fine and figure that out eventually. It's not like a systemic issue, I don't think, for him. Let's talk about the offense for a second. Obviously, we should get into the fact that he's been extremely efficient in his first 2 seasons. He had a 71% true shooting this year, which is speaks for itself. That's an uber elite number. He finishes extremely well around the rim. That's not a big surprise. He's got great touch for a guy his size. It's pretty impressive he's able to finish the way that he does. He's not a 7-foot like dunk only guy, and to shoot I think he was 69% from the floor this year. It's pretty tough to do that without being a 7-footer that's only dunking. And yeah, he's not shooting jump shots yet, if he even will. And we'll definitely get to that too. But I wonder what you make of his finishing, because it's definitely been as advertised. And I think his touch kind of also inherently leads to questions about whether he can shoot long term.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's an elite finisher, especially when you look at, he's basically been 78% at the rim, both seasons, right there. But you mentioned it too, the fact that when he gets cut off, he can adjust. Like even sometimes when there's a lob, and he can't quite get to the rim, he'll catch the lob, come down, and just kind of go right back up with just beautiful touch. And that's something that Clint doesn't have.
No.
And even when John's, playing, when JC's playing at the 5, he's not as broad-shouldered as Okongwu is. And John, takes kind of 2 or 3 kind of, attempts together and kind of time. Okongwu just catches it, goes right back up with no kind of concern at all, and has a nice kind of high release point in that, 5 to 7 foot range, for example. And so, I mean, that's one of the reasons he's so intriguing to me, is that he pairs so well with Trey offensively, and there's other facets I know we're going to get into beyond just the kind of the finishing. But I mean, I think he kind of gives you everything you could want there, and that, I think that's especially important as we saw this year with teams not playing straight drop and really prioritizing bringing more bodies into the paint. The fact that if there's a body in between him and the paint when he's diving to the rim, that he still has something to work with that's very reliable, is a big differentiator on offense for them compared to the other guys that play the position there.
Yeah, he's got such great craft for a guy his age. I mean, he kind of came into the league with it in a lot of ways, with the way he finishes and the way you kind of articulate the way he even just goes up to finish. It's not, it's very not deliberate. It's like more, I don't know. He's pretty explosive. He's not this, like, I wouldn't describe it as like a 100% athlete. He's not, I mean, he's a good athlete. Don't get me wrong, but he's not like a crazy leaper, but he does get up high for someone his size and really is in control of his body, which I think is really impressive. And the pick and roll game is interesting. I think he found some real chemistry with Lou Williams the last couple of years. That's been talked about a lot, even by us. The fact that kind of Lou was big for his development, just the way that he was able to play with him and find some of those tricks of the trade. And he hasn't played with Trey an absolute ton. Like, he plays with Trey sometimes, obviously, but I'll be interested to see how he sort of grows with Trey as a partnership there as they continue to play more together. What do you think of him as a screener? Because that's one of the questions about a smaller center sometimes, is that, like, are they a great screener? And Capella, again, is a really good screener. Do you mind that aspect of his game? Like, what do you see of sort of the in-between stuff with him? Not necessarily just finishing around the rim and just shooting, but like the craft and the way that he sort of operates off the ball, does know where to be, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, he kind of starts with the fact that, especially for a young guy, he's always looking for something helpful to do. So even if he's not in the primary action, he's kind of looking around, trying to create a little space. He's always looking to kind of, ad-lib a hammer screen on the weak side and, free up a shooter and things like that. Sneak down to the dunker spot, even if the play doesn't necessarily call for him to be there, to get behind a defense that's loading up high. So, I mean, he has all great feel and great read in real time, and it kind of goes back to what I said before, the great processing. The ball screens, I think, when there is some lack of chemistry there that you might see with Trey sometimes, again, it goes back to reps, I think. And the fact that he's been the backup center mostly, and things like that. And, one of the most brilliant reasons, for Travis to have gone out and got Clint was that he ran a billion pick and rolls with Harden and kind of came, to Atlanta with all of that. That's obviously something that Okongwu didn't have, coming into the league, having played 1 year at USC. I know that there's been a lot of discussion around him playing with Lonzo and LaMelo kind of, in his high school days. It helped him a lot. I don't think they're running a ton of pick and roll, but he knew how to be a supporting big on offense at a pretty young age. And to me, that all shows up, especially when he's looking for helpful things to do. That to me does kind of map back to the role that he kind of played in high school. So I think the ball screening can get cleaner. The reads as to when he to slip that versus to kind of finish the screen all the way through But with his type of athleticism, they don't often what we call ghost screens, where you kind of step up to the screen and then not even slip it, but kind of you abandon it before you get there and clear out to create some indecision on the part of two defenders. I think with him, sort of like we talked about on defense, there's going to need to be a little bit of scheme and technique variance to kind of separate him according to the unique things he can do. It's similarly on offense. His lateral movement and the way that he can kind of operate after a screen is different than Clint. Like, you don't want Clint catching the ball at the free throw line
No.
much at all, right?
Yeah.
JC, you're more so comfortable there, but even then, it's taken to get to about year 4 before you kind of see some really pretty consistent reads there. Okongwu is already pretty far along, and so part of I think part of the way you evaluate him as a screener is like, well, what are you trying to do with him after the screen? And how are you trying to get him to move off of that screen, post screen, things like that. And that's where I know we'll dig into it, but there is a ton of potential there that could change the way you kind of see him used as a screener. But he's good. Some of the nuance they need from him will require a little bit of variance, like handling him a little differently than you do Clint and even JC in some ways too.
Yeah, he is the most natural of their short roll guys, the kind of operating that mid area. Not as a shooter yet, but as a decision maker. And he's kind of you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned about Collins, because that was something he just didn't do at all early in his career, and now he's gotten a lot better there. He's making those passes, but he's never been the most natural guy in doing that. I think Okongwu's got great feel in that little mid range. He also has that little push shot already, which kind of goes back to the touch aspect a little bit. He's actually shot very well in that like 5 to 12 foot range, as is sort of defined by some of those shot metrics and places like that. But I think that he really will do well to hopefully find some perimeter shooting in the future. That is one of the questions about Onyeka, of course. And I've been saying for a while that he could take huge advantage of this offseason as kind of the first time in his career he's actually been healthy for an extended period of time, when he wasn't playing games, because as you well know, like, the skill development takes place for a lot of guys, especially young guys, in the offseason. And this is probably the flashing sign of the best time for him to potentially be working on his jump shot. So I say all that. I'll give you the underlying numbers. He's basically not taking any jump shots in his career so far. It's basically some push shots and nothing else. But he did shoot pretty well at the line this year, about 73%. That's not a bad number for a big guy in particular. That was an improvement from the previous year. And even dating back to pre-draft stuff, people really thought, that I talked to, that saw him in workouts, there's always been a belief from the Hawks side that he will be able to shoot at some point. Now, whether that's going to be he'll be John Collins shooting 39% from three, I don't really know if that's going to happen. But this is an organization, now obviously a different coaching staff, but they turned some guys into shooters that weren't shooters under this sort of similar. I mean, Travis was here anyway with guys like Alex Len and Dwayne Dedman, and like, it can be done. And I think Okongwu has the natural touch for it. But at the same time, you can't just assume he's going to be a great shooter. So that is a pretty. I purposely waited a long time on this conversation to turn into the shooting conversation, because it's like there's room between like non-shooter and really good shooter. That's probably where he's probably going to be somewhere in the middle of those things. Like, I think Collins is kind of an outlier in just how good he's become as a shooter. That you can't just bank on that. But I do think that at a minimum, they're going to try him as a shooter at some point, maybe in the mid-range first before three-pointers. But at some point, that's going to be a swing thing for him upside-wise. Like, maybe he'll be more like Bam Adebayo. It's a famous comparison he gets where Bam's not shooting a ton of threes, but he's a reliable 16-foot jump shooter, and Okongwu's not quite even there yet. So I said a lot of words there, Glenn, but what do you make of his shooting potential based on, obviously, we're kind of in the dark here. Like, we're having to guess more than like the coaching staff would. They see him shoot in practice. We don't see that. But based on all of what we know and the underlying metrics and sort of his touch, is he going to be able to shoot, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think your point about expecting him to get to like 39%, that seems really unlikely to me.
It's plausible, but not. You can't say likely. That's for sure. It's plausible.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of that comes with the shot profile. Like, when he starts to shoot from three, is that mainly the corners? Like, yep. He might be more likely to get to like 37 or something like that if it's mostly the corners, right? And the touch is usually the thing that is most indicative of whether that might be able to kind of come along or not. After touch, it's footwork. And I remember I wrote. I'm not sure if you edited it or if you remember. I wrote his draft profile when he came into the draft class, and I talked about the fact that his touch was excellent, but his footwork was a mess. And so if he could ever kind of get the footwork kind of straightened out, that could come along. But for me, it's like when I think of shooting, I think we have to ask ourselves, why do you want him to shoot? Like, what do you want to do with it? It's not just a matter of like, oh, let's get him to be like JC, he can finish at the rim and shoot. For me, if he can shoot from the corner, that opens up his opportunity to play with different kinds of bigs than what he has right now. Because basically right now when he's on the court, he has to play with a power forward that's a shooter, right? And so if you can get him be able to be parked in the corner, in the weak side corner, and kind of be a guy who can catch and shoot from there, it opens up a lot more kind of different lineup constructions that'll work for you. In addition to that, if you're having him work really, really hard on defense in some matchups, like getting him really up high at the level of the screen, being really aggressive, sometimes on the other end of the court, you want to give them a little bit kind of lower energy responsibility, which can be kind of spotting up. You'll see with the Celtics do that right now. Like when Al is really getting up to the level of the screen and working really, really hard, that's when they'll more often kind of put him in the corner and give him a little bit of a breather on offense. It'd be nice if that's something that's in kind of the tool bag, this year is to have that option. And then in addition to that, when he has 2 fouls halfway through the second quarter, a lot of bigs pick up the third foul, setting the screen, and so having something else he can do where he's not as likely to kind of pick up that foul on offense is helpful too. So in a vacuum, I think the shot is going to come along and be something that kind of works for him. I don't know if I should have expectations for him, say 2 years from now, having an above the break 3 that defenses react to and care about. But for me, step one is getting him to be kind of reliable in that range, short roll push shot range, sort of the Montrezl Harrell is what I think of kind of as a classic kind of guy there. That I think is the next step for him. And whether we see this year or not, I think we'll see some this year is that corner 3 that might be kind of part of his development now. But for me, I think and maybe this is what we'll talk about next, but the ball handling and passing is way ahead of I expect way more from him as a ball handler and a passer this year. I know we talked about his passing, but he's got a pretty good developing handle too for a guy who plays the positions he does as well. And so that's the kind of the thing that will pop this next year. I think is more in that ball handling and passing area, and then sort of the shooting trailing that. I think is developmentally what we'll see kind of come along in the next year.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it the way that you did about, oftentimes it's like, obviously you want everybody to be able to do everything. And I get that. But I think one of the underrated things that you and I talked about John Collins is the fact that he can play with different guys because he can do all those things. And your point about Okongwu is a great one. Like, yeah, it'd be great if he could just shoot in a vacuum. But part of that, especially when you're dealing with a guy who's 6'8" at center, is that maybe you have to pair him sometimes with a guy who can't shoot. And right now you can't, basically. I mean, you could try it, but you're going to have real spacing issues if you're playing him with a non-shooter. Like, let's just say, for a wild example, there's the Ben Simmons hypothetical that Hawks fans really enjoy. If suddenly the Hawks had Ben Simmons playing with current Okongwu, that's a spacing disaster. Like, you have 2 non-shooters, like complete non-shooters on the court, and that's tough. Obviously, they'd be great on defense, and there'd be ways to get around that. But part of the reason why Collins, at least in the eyes of us, I know I can speak for you on this one, I think, is kind of underrated, is that he can do both things. He can be your role guy. He can be your pop guy. Right. And, I'm not saying that Okongwu has to be able to do all of that the same way that John does, but that's an underrated aspect of being able to shoot is the lineup versatility, especially when, again, you are a little bit limited size-wise. It would be really, really helpful if he could shoot. If he can't ever shoot, like, he can still be awesome. That's the thing about Okongwu. Like, I don't want it to get lost. He could still be a really, really good starting center without shooting. He really could. Like, he's so good at everything else that he doesn't have to be able to shoot, but it would be very helpful at the same time. So before we get out of here, you sort of got it to it about the passing and the ball handling and the way he kind of operate in that short roll area. Like his turnover rate went down a little bit this year, and assist rate went up a little bit. That's good. Still some rookie stuff from him, obviously. Basically, he's been a rookie for 2 years. He hasn't played a lot of minutes, but the natural ball handling, the natural talent there is way ahead of most 20-year-old centers. That's for sure. I mean, how you unlock that is a question, or not a bad question, but it's one of those questions about, offensive, like, I don't know, scheme wise, approach wise, how you maximize that. But he does have those skills already in a way that are pretty intriguing.
Yeah, agreed. And it's going to be interesting to see how much of that they tease out this year and even early this year, especially coming out of the Miami experience in that first round, 5-game series where the Miami just forced the ball to Trey's hands all the time, and the Hawks struggled. Clint was coming back from injury, JC was too, but I mean, we have to all admit that even if both of those guys were 100%, JC is what, average for a power forward at best, kind of operating that phase of the game, and Clint gives you very little. And this is where Okongwu could really unlock a lot of different things that they could do on offense. And part of that is not just the passing. It's not just him kind of turning and catching the ball and firing to one corner or the other, or whatever it might be, or kind of, feeding the other big with a lob at the rim or something like that. But even the ball handling to kind of get downhill, create a shot for himself at the rim, I think is very possible this year if that's something that they'll empower him to do. So he is already, in my mind, pretty significantly above average for his position as a passer, and the ball handling alone too. I don't think we've seen enough to really evaluate and say this is what he is as a ball handler, but what little we've seen has been encouraging to me. And in my mind, if they don't unlock him to some degree in the short roll this year, that's when I start talking about a missed opportunity with Okongwu, because this is the year to put him into that situation. And for example, let's say that a year from right now is when is the optimal time to make a decision about Clint or Okongwu. Getting him into the short roll this year and seeing what he can do is a critical kind of part of something that should feed into a decision like that. So this is probably the area of the game. Like I love watching him play defense, even though he's still a little mistake prone at times as a young guy. But in terms of what I am like most excited to see coming into this next season across the whole roster, it's probably, if I had to put it, I'd put Okongwu as a ball handler and passer, maybe number one. I'm that excited to see what he can do. I'm not, I wouldn't be blown away if he turned into a Draymond level, ball handler and passer. That's what a really high outcome for him. I don't know how likely it is. I'm just saying I wouldn't be. His processing is so good. His feel is so good. He does things in real time so well that it wouldn't shock me. Again, I'm not predicting that it's the likely outcome. It's just like, I wouldn't be shocked if he's one of the best 5 big men in the league in a year and a half from now, or, going into year 4 or whatever, in that area. We need to see more to know like how realistic that might be. Sure. I'm just trying to express how excited I am for what might be possible for him in that area.
Yeah, he's super skilled, and we said it in a number of different ways, but I'm going to be. I'm still fascinated by it. You can probably hear it in our voices if you're listening or watching the podcast. Like, we're pretty fascinated about what this could look like for Okongwu, and that leads to the decision they have to make at the position. And people that know us know that we're both very high on Clint, and we both like Clint a lot, and we both think Clint's very good. So it's this really interesting. It's not a bad problem to have, but the way that I always put it is that you don't draft Okongwu at number 6 overall to be your backup center. That's just not what you draft that guy for long term. And the first 2 years, that's totally fine. But now you get into year 3, and especially into year 4 and beyond, like, he probably needs to be starting somewhere. And it won't be alongside Clint Capella. Those guys don't really work together perfectly. I know that's a question we get all the time. And if Okongwu could shoot, maybe they could do that a little bit. But I think it's not going to be a primary look for them at any point. So I'll be fascinated by it. I mean, that's not really what you and I are here to do, to talk about like what they're going to do there. We don't really know. People always ask me what they're going to do. And I mean, I think that if I had to guess, it's more likely that they move on from Clint than they do from Okongwu. I would say that. I'm not going to say that that's a definite. If they had to put Okongwu in a star trade, they probably would have to do that and just kind of swallow hard and do it. But I think he's on that list of guys for me, at least what I understand behind the scenes of. They're not going to trade him unless they have to trade him, like for a star level guy. They're not looking to move Okongwu. In fact, he might be their second. Honestly, he might be the second least possible guy to trade on the roster. Like obviously Trey's in his own tier, but in terms of what I understand about this situation, he's not their best player besides Trey yet. He could be in the future, but like if you go down the roster, it seems more likely that JC is traded before Okongwu or that Capella traded for Okongwu. Even Hunter now, I think a year ago, I probably would have said Hunter, but after kind of a weird season for Hunter, I think it might be Okongwu. Like, I think he's not going to get traded if I had to guess. So long-term, I think he'll probably be the guy and we'll see what happens. That's not a guarantee, but we'll be fascinated to see how they both mold the roster around him and also how he molds because like, he's still so young. Like we're really encouraged. I feel like I'm speaking for you, but you can weigh in too about what he already looks like through 2 years, but he's still super young, man. I mean, I said it before, but this is a guy who's 21 years old and he's played less than 100 games in the NBA. Like there's a lot of untapped stuff here and, knock on wood, fingers crossed that he's healthy in year 3 and gets kind of see the full season of that. But I want to see what it looks like coming out of the offseason. I mean, you talk about summer league. I don't think he's going to play there, but I'd love to see him practice once, like sometime. Like, I mean, I don't know. It'd just be fun to see like what that progression looks like from April to October. Like that's going to be a big jump, and it could be a huge time for him in his development.
Yeah, and we had this conversation with Hunter, but I think another part of like thinking about what he can do offensively, if he can become more role versatile in offense, is like if the future is then playing Jalen at the 4 and let Jalen become a power forward creator, him shooting from the corner becomes really valuable and really important. Him becoming a connected passer and a distance that is important. So it's kind of funny to talk about. Like I don't really know how I'm not saying they aren't invested in Jalen, but if they are this offseason heading into next year, like especially if Gallo does move on, if they become like really invested in Jalen, the way that they develop Okongwu is critical for that. The way that Hunter is leveraged is critical for that because Jalen could have a really offensive role, that has important implications for how Hunter is developed and role defined. And I think the same thing applies to Okongwu. And then the other thing is, you mentioned on the kind of trade perspective, one of the reasons it's hard to trade him is that where the league continues to go at center, Okongwu does all the things that the teams are wanting the young bigs to do, right?
Yep.
More versatility on both ends of the court. And so from that vantage point, it's like it seems like there's a lot of teams that'd love to have him, and like maybe someone would pay you handsomely to get him, and you have to think about that in a certain situation. Like I think about and I've talked about this a little with Kevin, but like when you think about where Toronto's trying to go with what they do on defense, like Okongwu would be an incredible find for them and kind of fit what they do and stuff like that. And it's not just them, but I feel like Nick Nurse is kind of always innovating, a bit more than the average coach, things like that. So. But to me, that's one more reason to kind of hang on to him and to continue to develop him and things like that. And especially if Jalen's going to kind of come in, if you're going to tweak Hunter's role, what Okongwu can do. If you're going to hey, we want to reduce a little of Hunter's on-ball stuff, like getting Okongwu on ball in the short roll and slipping and all that. I mean, all these puzzle pieces are critical, and the fact that Okongwu has some potential in some areas that could really help him fit with those other young guys is a really important part of what Travis and the rest of the organization has to be thinking about from a roster construction perspective. And that's what makes it so interesting to talk about, I think.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. And, I'd love to know how invested they are in Jalen. And it's impossible to tell. Like he kind of fell in their lap in the draft, and then they went through a full season where they didn't really play him, but that wasn't like an organizational thing. It was like just where they were. So I kind of have no idea. As much as we're trying to be plugged in, it's really hard to figure that stuff out. And yeah, I think that for all those reasons and all the ones we talked about, like Okongwu seems like a foundational piece. And at the same time, there's always uncertainty for a guy who just hasn't played that much. I mean, I know we're very high on him. That's very clear in this conversation, but there's no guarantee that he makes 3 more leaps and is an all-star. Like that's not, I mean, we're in that sweet spot of real uncertainty with him right now, where he's never been a starter. He's never been the full workload guy. He does have the injury questions. He does have, the role questions and all that stuff. So, we're very high on him. I think it's very clear. It's just really interesting to see him be on. I mean, it's kind of like Hunter, like you said, it's a very big year in terms of what you learn about him, both organizationally and just individually. Like, what's he going to be long term? And he's still very young. He has the advantage of being very young. That's a guy where, like, if you're 21 versus 23, 24, that is an advantage to be this young on your going into year 3. But we said a lot about him. But if you have anything else to add, Glenn, feel free. If not, we can get out of here. But I know you're a busy man out there on the West Coast.
Yeah, no, I that's from my vantage point. We had everything there. I mean, we're obviously, like you said, we're excited about him, and I think where he differentiates himself, like possibly, if not likely, from Clint and JC, is I think he has the ability to be kind of provide equal value on both ends. John gives you more value on offense. Clint gives you more value on defense. If Okongwu can kind of continue hitting his developmental stride, growing, he's one of those kind of rare bigs that could give you potentially, I think, equal value on both sides, and that's really hard to find, which is one of the reasons that I agree with you that he's unlikely to be traded unless an incredible
some superstar trade happens. I just can't see him being traded any other way right now. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'd be surprised.
Right there with you. So yeah, I think that covers it from my perspective. I could probably do 2 more hours and dig way in, but that's not how.
Yeah, you and I could go super on any of these guys. I feel like we somehow just did 45 plus minutes on that without even breaking a sweat, I think. But no, I appreciate it, Glenn. Please, people, plug your. I know you do this all the time for me, but please plug yourself and all of what you have going on. Beyond this podcast, because you have more things that you talk about and write about.
Yeah, so if you're on YouTube, you see the handle there at Willis_Glenn. I'm not sure when this is going to publish. Right now, we're enjoying the first 2 games of the finals and be conversive on Twitter there. I help now generate draft profiles. Peachtree Hoops, follow our work there. Always proud of the work we do, kind of digging into the draft class, and then 8 and 29 with Kevin. We're trying to do about 1 a week right now, kind of covering any Hawks news that pops, plus just observations on the playoffs as they continue. So that's where you can find my stuff, and always appreciate follows and enjoy conversations and back and forth and all that stuff.
Yeah, please check out Glenn's work. It is outstanding, and I recommend it at the highest level. Glenn, thank you for joining me on the show. As for everybody else, please subscribe to the podcast on your podcast platform of choice, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, all those places. Check out Glenn on ATL 129, Peachtree Hoops, etc. We'll see you next time.